There we go. Casey, how are you? It's great to be back. How you been?
Jacob, it's been a good time. I think it's maybe lagging just a little bit because I was running too much stuff. That's my bad. I've been good. I've been good though. The Bengals, since last time we talked, have won two games, so that was fantastic. Uh, the Bengals look like they're back. I think the last time we talked, Alabama had not yet won the SEC championship, so that's great for you. Overall,
Thank you very much.
the last 2 weeks have been great for us. Fantastic, in fact.
Yeah, all around. Can't complain down here either. It's been a whole lot of fun sneaking into the playoff against a lot of people's wishes, but it's fun for us. And then obviously Jake Browning got the Bengals trending in the right direction. Last time we were here, we were talking about potential draft picks in the first half of the draft. Now, writing about Vikings Bengals this Saturday, I was looking at ways to get into the playoffs. So it's been quite the change over the last couple of weeks, and that's certainly very exciting. But Casey, let's get right into the rundown from last week before we get into the games for this week. The first thing, the biggest thing for everybody is the QB injuries this season. Quarterbacks have been dropping like flies. It's been absolutely ridiculous. In Cincinnati, obviously, Joe Burrow went down. Well, we talked about Jake Browning taking over. You lost Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, Daniel Jones in New York, Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Justin Herbert this week, CJ Stroud in concussion protocol right now. The Vikings bench Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullens in. Casey, the quarterbacks in the NFL at this point in the season are just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely abysmal. It's honestly a shame for the NFL that they are going through this at the current moment. Um, I mean, we're almost at crunch time, right? And more than half of the NFL quarterbacks are either bad or backups, or you don't know what their situation is. And I, it's honestly just it's fun for the unknown, the unpredictability, and if you're a huge football fan, sometimes it gives you an advantage, like the Bengals and how they only have to face backup quarterbacks except for Patrick Mahomes for the final four games of the year. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not even just quarterbacks either. I mean, we've had a lot of injuries to just star players in general, like the Mark Andrews, like Justin Jefferson being out for most of the time, which looks like he's good to go. Looks like he's good to go. But it's been a weird NFL year for injuries.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you said it best right there. And people even on the defensive side of the ball up getting hurt. You saw Trayvon Diggs go down right before the season. Seems like more stars than ever have been hurt this season, which is such a shame for us Bengals fans that Joe went down because it feels so wide open. It truly feels like almost any team in both conferences could win the whole thing. Moving on to the next point, we touched on it there, but the Jake Browning era continues for the Cincinnati Bengals, now 2-0 in his last two games. And the AFC wildcard race is an absolute log jam of 7-6 teams, Casey.
Yeah, the big log jam currently. It's weird because we had this conversation on the show today. We talked about how the just the AFC wild card, or just the AFC playoff teams in general, if you stack them up against the NFC playoff teams, that the NFC is probably better. But there's just so many AFC just playoff teams, or like in the hunt teams, that it's really just crazy. I wonder, they attempted to expand the playoffs by adding that third wild card spot, and yet we're still having problems to where there's going to be a team potentially with a 10-7 record and be sitting out of the playoffs this year. I mean, it's just wild.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that kind of competitiveness down there at the back half of a lot of the divisions, and you see the exact opposite thing happening in the other conference. The NFC South is ridiculous. We're going to have one of those four teams host a playoff game at a sub 500 record. We're talking about a potential 9-10 win team being left out in the AFC. And on the other side of the coin, you have a team with a losing record that's probably going to be playing at home. Casey, I don't know if this is a bigger issue, whether we should reseed when the playoff starts or whatever that conversation might be. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Atlanta Falcons, and New Orleans Saints, none of those three teams deserve to host a playoff game, Casey.
No, I don't think they deserve it either. I don't even know what you do, how you go about changing it. Like, I guess you just start doing a ranking system in some form or fashion. I just don't know how you go about doing it without completely overhauling how playoffs work at the current moment. But it's not even just that NFC South either. It could be one or two wildcard teams with a really bad record sneak in there as well. I think right now it could be the Packers have that final wildcard spot at 6-7. It's just weird in the NFC. I mean, we all know that those teams probably won't do anything against the Cowboys, the 49ers, and the Eagles. But you gotta play who you gotta play in the NFC. So I don't know.
The Rams, the Seahawks, the Falcons sitting right there at the bottom, and teams like the Giants and the Bears, teams that we wrote off so early in the season, just a game and a half back of a wild card spot. So crazy to think about these teams whose seasons were all but over early in the season. And with just the abysmal play by the rest of the teams in the NFC, they're catching up. They have some life here late in the season in Week 15. At the top of the NFC is a different story, though. There seems to be three teams that are really setting themselves apart, and one proved that they were real this last weekend. The Cowboys beating the Eagles, dominating the Eagles truly for 60 minutes. The Cowboys might be legit for the first time in my life. I think I believe in them to do something beyond the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation with the guys maybe off the show. It might have been on the show too. I can't quite remember, but players are allowed to have down seasons and they're allowed to have really great seasons. And you look at Dak Prescott, and we're probably going to mention this earlier or later on in the show, he's in that conversation for front runner at MVP. And that really has made it to where this Cowboys team is being taken seriously. They already had a great defense. Their offense had a lot of great pieces, a lot of great weapons. But it was always, can Dak Prescott get these guys over the hump? He beat a very good Eagles team and looked really good doing it. I've compared them to the 2015 Bengals, where Andy Dalton, most of us consider him average. Well, that season he was in the MVP conversation. He had basically gotten the Bengals to a point where they were at that number one seed until he went down. But Dak Prescott is pretty much in the exact same situation as of today, where playing great, considered pretty much like an average quarterback, but playing great out of his mind, and ride the hot hand while you can, right? I mean,
you're exactly right. Cam Newton called him a game manager today, and everyone seemed to kill him and say that was such a bad take. I don't think game manager is always a bad thing. Sometimes you have great weapons, and the best way for your team to win is to find someone that's not going to lose you the football game and get those weapons the football. Dak's done a great job of that over the last few weeks, and that's why you've seen the Cowboys offense look so much better. You don't always need a playmaker that's going to do something crazy and roll out and sidearm pass, or Josh Allen hovering over the out-of-bounds line, finding Latavius Murray. Something just unbelievable is not always necessary. There's only a handful of quarterbacks in the league that are truly playmakers, that truly make stuff happen on their own. Everyone else is really a game manager, and your chance to win a Super Bowl is how well you can manage the game and how well you can limit turnovers. And that's what Dak's done right now, is he's capitalizing on the mistakes of the defense, and he's not making mistakes of his own. So, I mean, kudos to Dak, because I know a lot of people, myself included, wrote him off going into this season, said he wasn't in that upper echelon, even that second tier of quarterbacks. And he's certainly proven us all wrong right now. So, you know, that Cowboys team looks really scary. I know we're going to get into them here in a little bit.
Yeah. And then last but not least, we got to talk about the legend of Tommy DeVito. I mean, Monday Night Football was a couple good games. We had Titans versus Miami with the big upset and a crazy comeback. I had actually went to bed thinking that Miami was pretty much, handled their business, and turns out they didn't. And the legend of Tommy DeVito just continues to grow. He's won a couple games with the Giants, and the Italian mob memes are everywhere and rampant in the NFL.
Yeah, his agent was pictured on the sideline with him in just a ridiculous getup. I love the whole Tommy DeVito story. His parents tailgate before the game, serving chicken cutlets in the parking lot in front of the stadium. It seems like that group is just absolutely wringing the most fun out of this that they possibly can, whether it lasts 4 or 5 weeks, or maybe if he keeps winning like this, he'll be the future of the New York Giants. So they'll be having fun with it the whole time. Tommy seems like truly a great kid, all in front of the media and everything like that. And he's playing really well. After the first couple weeks, it seemed like Kafka and the Giants were scared to let him throw the football downfield. And every now and then they get stuck in that little rut with just, settling for screen passes or giving Saquon 10, 15 carries in a row. But when they let Tommy throw the ball downfield, he's shown flashes of being a really legitimate NFL passer. And that's why they've kept him in games. I had the Packers on Monday night, and when Jordan Love scored with about 90 seconds left, I was as confident as could be. I was victory lapping over all my Giants fans' friends, and they probably weren't too confident either. But Tommy DeVito, another game-winning drive under his belt, NFC Offensive Player of the Week this week, just an unbelievable start to his career. And you talked about that Titans-Dolphins game. Teams in Titans situation were 0-767, down 14 with under 3 minutes to go. Just an unbelievable comeback by Will Levis. I don't know if I'm all the way in yet on a guy that puts mayonnaise in his coffee, but do you think he could be a legitimate NFL quarterback for the Tennessee Titans?
I have no clue just yet. I mean, I've seen him do well for a couple weeks, and I've seen him do really poorly for a couple weeks. So it's his rookie's year. He's going to have bumps and bruises. Titans were pretty much out of it anyways, so you might as well just make a mess of things and see where you're at the end of the year. And that's what he's done. I mean, they put up 28 points against the Colts. They put up 28 against the Dolphins. That's a really good start. Yeah, I mean, I like what I see. I think DeAndre Hopkins has really helped him grow in that area. I think he's really relying on DeAndre Hopkins. Would love to see what it looks like with maybe another weapon at receiver, but only time will tell. We'll see how Will Levis does in the future.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect take. It's always risky to get all the way in on a rookie quarterback after just a couple high games, or all the way out on a couple low lights. So yeah, waiting on Will Levis definitely a good plan. But DeAndre Hopkins doesn't get much better when it comes to a safety blanket than that. He catches almost anything. We saw that catch on Monday night over Jalen Ramsey. Just makes the young quarterback's life so much easier.
Did you also see a little, not off topic, but that picture of Jalen Ramsey trying to tackle Will Levis? Just absolutely crunched Jalen Ramsey. Made him look silly.
Folded him in half.
Yeah, folded him in half.
Mike Vrabel said that they showed Will Levis videos of quarterbacks sliding and using the rules to their advantage throughout the week, and obviously he tried to run Jalen Ramsey over. So Mike Vrabel said this week they'll be showing Will Levis pictures and videos of quarterbacks being hit hard and hurt when they don't slide. So hopefully that changes his mind. I thought that was a pretty funny anecdote from one of my favorite coaches in the league.
That is kind of funny. I did not know or hear that. But that's a good one from Vrabel. That's a good one. Let's move on to the topic that everyone wants to talk about. The game that everyone wants to discuss. Bengals versus Vikings. Currently, as it stands right now, the Bengals are 3.5-point favorites on Betfred Sportsbook. Over under being 40.5. Jacob, what are your opening thoughts on this game?
I'm excited. I think it's ridiculous that this game is being played Saturday afternoon, when we were probably circling this game to be Sunday night when it came out, that Sunday slash game at the beginning of the year. This was supposed to be a Vikings team with Kirk Cousins at the top of the NFC against a Bengals team with Joe Burrow probably playing for the 1 seed. And obviously now with Nick Mullens versus Jake Browning, that's not exactly the heavyweight matchup that we expected this weekend. But I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun game. Jake Browning has relit my fire, per se, for the Cincinnati Bengals this year. I was all the way out and all the way on Team Tank. Even after his win in Jacksonville, I was a little bit hesitant to get all the way back in. But after this last week, yeah, I'm all the way ready to go. And I think the Bengals are going to really put on a show this weekend for the hometown fans. And in my favorite uniform combination, the All Blacks. I think it's the best thing we do, and I think we should definitely wear them more often.
Yeah, I have to agree. I love the All Blacks. I love the blackout. I love the fact that Zach Taylor asked us all to get blackout drunk, raging fans. I will be at the game this Saturday. I got tickets with my buddy Thomas, and so we're gonna be somewhere, I think, on the south side of the end zone, 150 something. Not sure what row just yet, but we'll be in that section, cheering loud for our Bengals team. Jake Browning, he's such a mystery to me. I'm still not all the way there. Like I'm all the way in that the Bengals can make the playoffs, but I'm not all the way in that Jake Browning is like this just diamond in the rough that we found, because we saw what it looked like in the preseason. We saw what it looked like against the Ravens and the Steelers. You play two good teams, but teams that have some questions, has some issues, and I mean, he just dominated them and just flat out torched them. And there's some big plays in the screen game, and I think a lot of people will say that he's a dink and dunk merchant, but he had some really good throws down the field. I know that one to T. Higgins, a lot of people point out is not a great throw, but he still made that read. He still made that throw to T. Higgins, put him in really good field position. The biggest thing for me is that the offensive line has been able to protect Jake Browning. That was really the crux of the problem for me, was Jake Browning going to get the protection that he needed in order to perform the way that people say that he could and that he's been performing. Last week they gave up 0 sacks. I mean, this offensive line has never looked any better, Jacob. It's performing at a very high level.
Yeah, and 0 sacks against a Colts interior defensive line with DeForest Buckner. That's regarded as one of the best defensive lines pass rush-wise in the entire league. So that's certainly a huge plus for the Bengals. And the other thing about this offense over the last couple of weeks is they were hiding Chase Brown from us. When we were running the Joe Mixon one running back offense, no one else in the backfield exists, my assumption was maybe Chase Brown wasn't an NFL running back. Maybe he was having trouble catching the ball in practice. Maybe he was fumbling a whole lot. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it might have been, because I really liked him coming out of Illinois. I thought he was a really good running back, really good in the receiving game, and it turns out we were all right. He's exactly what we all expected him to be. He caught 22 miles an hour on a screen pass, the second fastest player in the league behind DK Metcalf on a straight run this year. Just an unbelievable talent we found late in the draft. And I know everyone's been asking the questions, where do you see his ceiling? What kind of back do you think he could be? But the question I want to ask you, Casey, is what do you think he did for the first 12 weeks to just be stuck on the bench?
Well, first off, he did have an IR stint. I think people forget about that. He did have an IR stint. But one thing I do remember this was kind of in the back of my mind. I haven't really talked about it because I haven't gone and searched through the footage. But I do remember Zach Taylor saying that it was very unfortunate that he went down when he did, because they were going to start giving him more snaps. Gets tweaked in practice, is out for 4 weeks, and that just extended this prolonged issue at the running back position, not being able to run the ball, not being able to give Joe Mixon breaks. But, it's crazy. We were sitting at the beginning of the year saying, where's our Devon A-Chain? Where's our backup? Turns out we literally had a Devon A-Chain. Like, it's the same build, same speed, and same skill sets. And I'm just happy that the Bengals have that number 2 now. It seems like they're focused way more on being a balanced football team, being able to mix in a lot of runs to do the play action, opens up the passing game a little bit more. This Bengals offense has completely changed in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, it's a complete 180. I mean, they ran the ball 32 times, only passed for 26. So it's a huge change that we should have gone to it so much sooner. I think it was just unfortunate that the injury happened when it did, because I do believe Zach said that it was an unfortunate timing issue. But
That's probably a very fair assumption. I think it's important that we give one other person a lot of credit for this quick turnaround, and it's Zach Taylor.
yeah,
We were ragging his play calling and absolutely hating on him at the tail end of Joe Burrow's season this year. We thought it was just absolutely terrible what he was doing. And even in the first game with Jake Browning, just 8 rush attempts, everyone was ready to run him out of town, essentially. And in these last 2 weeks, he's changed his whole philosophy, and he's gotten creative, and he's made some trick plays, some stuff that we've never ever seen from the Bengals offense before, especially not in the Joe Burrow era. And I love it. I love Zach Taylor getting creative, and I just wonder if he feels a little bit tied up with his hands behind his back when Joe Burrow is his quarterback. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a bad way, but in the same way Lou Anarumo said his defense goes for more turnovers when Joe Burrow's at quarterback because you want to get the ball to him. I wonder if Zach Taylor is maybe a little bit more conservative and a little bit more relaxed when Joe Burrow's his quarterback, because Joe will take the normal play and make it great. He doesn't have to go into that great play archive, if you will, on his play sheet. And I think that's what he's doing right now. He's really letting loose as the play caller, getting into that bag of tricks and seeing what a lot of our other players deeper down the depth chart can do. And that's really encouraging for me as someone who was pretty upset with Zach Taylor at the beginning of the season. Seeing him do this and be creative with lesser talent is something I really wanted to see, and I'm really happy he's putting on tape.
yeah. I mean, we questioned his ability to do so. I think we can put that to bed, especially like if I ever catch myself talking crap about the play calling, I gotta stop, because more than likely it is a problem with the relationship between Burrow and what they believe he can do, which is fantastic, right? When he plays hero ball and he balls out, you look at that 49ers game. 49ers are the best team in the NFL right now, and he smoked them. He put those guys to sleep. And that was all Joe Burrow. I mean, he ran for, 45 yards on 6 attempts, scrambled around, made amazing throw after amazing throw. But at the same time, this team is very capable, and we saw it with the Colts, of just being able to be very balanced, run the ball down your throat, be able to throw it over the top when we need to. And yeah, kudos to Zach, because I didn't think he had it in him. I didn't think he would have the self-awareness, and he does. So yeah, kudos to him. Now, the other side of the ball has also had a dramatic turnaround. The defense just last week only gave up 7 points, Jacob. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, not a whole lot. I was really excited for this game last week. I thought it would be pretty high scoring. Gardner Minshew's been throwing the ball pretty well. I know he's obviously one of those backup quarterbacks we named at the beginning of the show, but he really has been playing well. He's been putting up some pretty serious numbers through the air, and the Bengals offense, or the Bengals defense, shut that offense down. There was really nothing for them to do all day long. I was really pleased with how that team looked on Sunday after looking pretty crappy earlier in the year.
Yeah, and I think what's crazy is there's not really been a change in terms of philosophy. I think what's changed is game script. In all honesty, I think the Bengals have just been better at managing the game. As soon as they get up, it just feels like Trey Hendrickson dominates every single game. Currently sitting at 13 and a half sacks. In my opinion, he probably should be at 14 and a half sacks, because they gave him 2 half sacks this last week when he was all over Gardner Minshew, I guess at the same time as a couple other guys, but whatever. Trey Hendrickson, top 5, definitely deserves it. I think not to give free ads to any other content creators, but Joe Goodberry just put out a couple really good pieces on the Trey Hendrickson versus TJ Watt statistical comparison and how they both perform. I mean, they're like the exact same player. The Bengals have their TJ
And one's
Watt.
a lot cheaper.
Yeah, the Bengals have their TJ Watt. We can stop that conversation of we don't have that dominant pass rusher. We do. We just don't have a guy to pair alongside with him. Maybe. Sam Hubbard has been doing phenomenal when he's healthy, so maybe we should just kind of put that conversation to rest at the moment, because as of right now, the last couple weeks, Bengals defense has been really good. They haven't been giving up a ton of yards like they were before, where it was 450 yards, 500 yards. It's the 350, the more average types of games. And they've been also all over the ball. They've still been able to create the turnovers when they needed to. That was kind of the key ingredient I was looking for, was them limiting the yards, so then that they wouldn't have that chance to break when they did bend. And they really did it last week. I want to see it continue moving forward.
And a lot of young guys, just like on offense, are stepping up on defense. Jordan Battle's been plugged in almost fully now for Nick Scott at the safety position, and he's been a great spark plug. Obviously, some growing pains here or there, but I am very happy with his play so far. Makes a big difference tackling around the line of scrimmage for sure. And then Myles Murphy, the first-round pick that I know a lot of us expected to see a lot more out of this year, isn't quite producing on the stat sheet what you'd like to see, but he's making a difference and he's playing a lot better and he's getting around the quarterback in a lot of different situations. So a lot of encouraging signs on this defense that's going to continue to get healthier, continue to get more reps under their belt. And I really think we have a good, strong, young unit going here for the long haul defensively.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to have to continue to rely on, is young success. And they're going to have to rely on drafting. And Jordan Battle stepping up, phenomenal. Again, we get into that. Why wasn't this guy here sooner? Why wasn't he playing sooner? Nick Scott was, I don't even want to really talk about Nick Scott.
Failed experiment will be the nicest way to put that.
Yeah, failed experiment. And I think Myles Murphy, I don't know, I think you did mention that he's been playing better and getting more reps. Myles Murphy, you can tell, has been getting better just in terms of, if you're watching the games and you are paying attention to when he's in the ball game, he's getting closer, dude. He's getting closer and closer each time. Just this last week, him and Trey meet as soon as Gardner Minshew lets go of the ball, which would be phenomenal if they ended up being the exact same type of pass rusher. I mean, that would be just insane. But anyways, the Bengals have
Before
to
we
face...
swing over to the Vikings,
okay.
I have one more thing. If you're ready to give up on Myles Murphy, I'm a big fan of Myles Murphy. If you're ready to give up on Myles Murphy, just go back and watch some of his Clemson tape. I did that earlier today after looking at his sack production. It just wasn't quite there yet in the NFL. That Clemson tape is unbelievable, and you'll buy back in right away. So don't give up on this kid. He's a physical specimen. Yep. He's getting better. Just give him a chance. We took him in the first round for a reason. I really, really think Myles Murphy is going to turn into exactly what Casey was talking about, a more productive Sam Hubbard on the opposite side of Trey Hendrickson.
Marion Hobby, right? That's the Bengals defensive lineman coach, I believe. Just have full faith that he can develop this guy. Have full faith, because the physical traits, dominant. He is a physical specimen. If he can just learn some of the more intricate moves, he'll be fine. And he might have a chance to really shine against the Vikings offense, which Josh Dobbs is no longer the starting quarterback. Don't know if that is a benefit to the Bengals or not. I don't really believe in Nick Mullens. He's not had a very good time in the NFL. But what are your thoughts on that quarterback situation? Because it doesn't look hopeful for the Vikings.
Yeah, it's not great. Obviously, Kirk Cousins was playing really well when he went down, and then Josh Dobbs gets to town on short notice, doesn't know any of the receivers, doesn't know the playbook, and he wins the game. And everyone thinks, wow, this guy might be the answer in Minnesota. And, Well, that certainly just wasn't the case. As he got to know the playbook and got to know the players, he got worse seemingly. And now he's been benched for Nick Mullens, who we've seen Nick Mullens plenty in the NFL. He started for San Francisco for many years, just switching off and forth with CJ Beathard out there. Then now he's been backing up Kirk for a couple years in Minnesota. And he's nothing special, but if there's one thing he does know how to do, it's dump the ball off to the tight end. And the Bengals certainly struggle guarding the tight end. George Kittle saw massive boosts in almost all of his stats when Nick Mullens was the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And the Vikings have a pretty special tight end too in TJ Hawkinson. So I saw someone ask earlier in the chat if we expected that we were going to get Hawkinson much like we got Freiermuth a couple weeks ago. And sadly, I do expect Hawkinsoning in Cincinnati. TJ Hawkinson's unbelievable. He's either tight end 2 or tight end 3, depending on who you ask in the NFL. And this year he's probably tight end 1. So I'm really, really nervous for this weekend because if I know anything, it's when starting quarterbacks go down, when backup quarterbacks go down, when you get further down the depth chart, they just focus on those star players and they dump it off to those star players. And TJ Hawkinson is obviously that star player in the Vikings offense.
Right. I have to agree with you. If you were looking at one consistent thing about this Bengals defense that's a negative, it would be guarding the tight end this year. It's not even just the Freiermuth game. You look at Evan Ingram and that touchdown against the Jags, the touchdowns, Mo Alley Cox for the Colts. I mean, the tight ends all year round. I mean, even the 49ers with Kittle. You can look throughout the entire year this year. Tight ends have just ate us up. That is going to be a player of concern. TJ Hawkinson, I'm very nervous about what he'll do against the Bengals defense, but it doesn't help when you also have to worry about Justin Jefferson, which he already committed to playing just an hour or two ago, said that he was going to play Saturday. That makes me even more nervous for this secondary, for this passing threat that we got to worry about now. Justin Jefferson didn't play a whole lot last week, right? He got hurt early in that game.
Yeah, it was either the first or second drive of the game. Josh Dobbs, with the definition of a hospital pass, just laid it up right over Justin Jefferson's head, both arms extended across the middle, and the safety sent him to the hospital. So that name isn't for nothing. And then they take Josh Dobbs out. Presumably that has something to do with it. You just cannot be laying your receivers out over the middle in the National Football League, especially a guy like Justin Jefferson. But very thankful he's back. Obviously not glad the Bengals have to play him, but for him to be on IR for so long and then fight to get back for the end of the season and then to get hurt like that so early in the game, well, it was terrible to see. So glad he's going to play this week, but definitely one of the top threats in the entire league and something the defense is going to have to pay attention to.
Right. And I was going to quickly look and see how Jordan Addison, is he injury report really quickly. Let me just double check, make sure that he's not ruled out just yet. I don't see anything as of right now. So I don't know if Jordan Addison maybe will also play that game as well. If he does, I mean, that's just another young threat that you got to worry about. The Vikings offense, very explosive. You can't count out Alexander Madison. He's been kind of quiet this year. You're bound to take a hit at that running back position when you lose a guy like Dalvin Cook. But Alexander Madison has been a serviceable starter there in Minnesota. And then they also have some decent backups there as well. You cannot count out this offense. I do not care who is at quarterback. When you have that many weapons and when the Bengals have a major flaw, a very easily detected flaw in the tight end position, just watch out. Watch out. Key is going to be, for me, against the matchup there of Vikings offense or the Bengals defense, they got to turn the ball over. They got to make the Vikings make mistakes. That should be not a terrible task. You know, it's Nick Mullens, like I said. Again, not a very good quarterback in the NFL. We'll see. We'll see how that works out.
defensively for this Vikings team, it's a confusing unit. Statistically, they're okay, but a lot of those statistics come from the last 2 weeks when they shut out the Raiders in a 3-0 victory and allowed one touchdown in a 12-10 loss to the Bears. So a lot of those statistics that show them as a middle of the unit or a middle of the pack unit are weighted very poorly because of those last two games. They have some star players. Obviously, Danielle Hunter, we all know, 13 and a half sacks, absolute superstar. Same number as Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, Trey Hendrickson not being talked about nearly as much, but we'll just, leave that as it is. But Danielle Hunter's been an absolutely amazing player this year, and the way they move him around from both edges into the inside is definitely something I'm worried about for the Cincinnati Bengals with our offensive line and where those holes might lie. But another player that's really emerged this season for this Vikings defense is Josh Metellus. He's played every position, Casey. And yeah. I'm not saying that as an exaggeration or anything like that. Other than nose tackle, he has played every single position, outside, inside linebacker, edge rusher, corner safety, all of them on the Vikings defense. That versatility is unheard of unless I'm forgetting somebody else to do at this high of a level. He has 1.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. He had a pick a couple weeks ago and 88 tackles, is second on the team. I know guys like Jabril Peppers and Isaiah Simmons have been marked as those do it all Swiss Army knife guys on defense, but none of them do it at this high of a level. Josh Metellus has been unbelievable this season.
Yeah, and if you're like a PFF guy or if you're an analytics guy, he's doing it at a pretty good level. PFF has him graded at 75, which is a decent player. That's an above average starter, and he does it all. He does it all very well, which is cool to see. We don't see a whole lot of Swiss Army knives around in the NFL. It's really cool to see it in Josh Metellus. Are we getting into Are we picking? Are we ready to pick?
I think we're picking. Yes, sir. And this number's stinky, Casey. 3.5. 3.5's a stinky number. That's a little too high for me, but I'm going to take the Bengals. I'm going to rock with Jake Browning. He has not given me a reason to deviate yet. So I'm going to stick with the boys, and I'm going to rock with Jake Browning, 3.5. But that hook is real ugly.
Yeah, I do think that this someone mentioned it in the chat. I do think that this number is different now with the news with Justin Jefferson. I think it's at 2.5. Does that change your? I mean, it doesn't sway it at all, anyways,
Bengals.
Right? Yeah,
but I love it now.
Yeah, I do love that. If it's at 2.5, really quickly, gonna give a little pub to one of our viewers, Drew Garrison, for this idea that I have, and really, it's his thing. He's been coming up with parlays, touchdown parlays, combining it with like Chase Brown. Because Chase Brown right now in the books is very, very high odds. And you combine it with Drew Sample or Tanner Hudson. And you're going to get phenomenal odds. I think for me, I'm going to parlay. And I know we're not really supposed to talk about the bets for this game, but I would parlay Chase Brown, and I'm gonna parlay Drew Sample. $10 will get you like $3,000, $4,000, just with that alone.
That's a big one right there, Casey. That's a stretch for those two to score a touchdown in the same game, but hey, if you got $10 lying around, that's a pretty fun bet for your Saturday afternoon.
Just go look at some of the past games with Jake Browning at quarterback. He's throwing it to a lot of random targets, my guy. He loves getting it to those backup tight ends. He loves getting it to none of the starting trio, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, or Jamar Chase. So just a thought. Let's move on to Cowboys versus the Bills. This is a really big matchup. It's a very weird matchup to me. Cowboys sitting at 10-3. Buffalo 7-6, and they're favored at Cowboys at Dallas. It's very, very strange.
I thought this one was in Buffalo, Casey.
Oh, is it in Buffalo? I'm sorry.
I believe so.
then
Let me double
I'm
check on
mistaken.
that just to make sure, but I do believe this one is in Buffalo. Yes, this
Yeah.
one is in Buffalo. So Buffalo 2.5 point favorite at home against the Cowboys this week. We touched on it in the rundown, but this Cowboys offense is kind of the story of the NFL at this point. Dak, the MVP favorite, he passed Brock Purdy this morning. He's playing out of his mind, playing maybe the best football he's played of his career, and he was an MVP, one of the MVP favorites as a rookie. So that's really saying something for him to be putting up these numbers right now, and that really comes back to them dumbing down the offense. I think the Cowboys sending Kellen Moore on his way out, sending Kellen Moore down to Los Angeles to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers, and letting Mike McCarthy take over and really call the shots for the offense and let Dak spend more time with Mike McCarthy and spend more time within the offense has really made it easier for him to digest it and read through and understand where the receivers will be, when they'll be open. And that's why you see guys like CeeDee Lamb blowing up at this point in the season. And Brandon Cooks looks like a legitimate wide receiver too now, 13 weeks into the season, which is obviously what they expected when they moved a fifth-round pick for him in the offseason. This Cowboys offense is coming together perfectly right now, and it might not be at a better time.
Yeah, it's kind of strange too, because I think a lot of us thought that there might be a step back because you lost Kellen Moore, I believe. You lost Kellen Moore to the Chargers, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. It looks like Mike McCarthy is still kind of got it a little bit. He's calling the plays down there in Dallas. Now, I will say that their schedule has been very, very easy up until this point. I think that the next couple weeks that they'll be truly challenged and tested against Buffalo, Miami, Detroit. But I think all those are definitely should be in Dallas's favor. I personally have no clue why Buffalo's favored in this game. I know it's at home. But anyways, we'll get into Buffalo here in a minute. Dallas on offense, they're just super balanced. They're super, super balanced right now. They can run the ball with Tony Pollard. They can get you into play action. Ferguson has stepped up at the tight end spot. I know we haven't really talked about that a whole lot, but he is the second leading receiver on this team behind CeeDee Lamb. I know you said Brandon Cooks is the number 2 receiver. Yes. The tight end, though, Jake Ferguson has really broke out this year. 5 touchdowns, 570 yards, 51 receptions. This offense is just really humming right now. And all these guys have been in the system for a long time right now. And they're proving that they can really be a high octane offense. But what makes
those three, Lamb, Ferguson, and sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna move on to what I think truly makes this team special and threatening is their defense. Micah Parsons, we all know about Micah. He is a true elite pass rushing talent. That defensive line is also just very stacked, very, very good. But the secondary, when we thought that Diggs, when he went down, that they would take a step back, that could have been further from the truth. It almost like lit a fire under them because Deron Bland, currently with 8 picks, broke the NFL pick 6 record. Stephon Gilmore has been an elite corner. Part of me thinks that it has to do a lot with the pass rush, but man, the secondary has been really carrying some of the slack there, at least in the turnover department. This defense is just all around really, really special.
Yeah, Deron Bland, certainly not someone that any of us expected this season to put on the show that he's put on. It's been unbelievable. 5 pick sixes, the NFL record, like you said, 8 picks on the year. But the one worry is that he is just a Trayvon Diggs copy. Though he does get those picks, though he does get that pick 6, 2 weeks ago we saw him give up over 150 receiving yards in the first half of the game. That is unbelievable numbers. No one in the NFL is doing that and still in the game. But his ability to pick the ball off and get the ball back to the offense makes him a valuable asset, even though he's not the best in solo coverage. So that's something I'm really interested to see how DaRon Bland continues to play this year, because it's just a couple bad bounces, a couple dropped picks, a couple mistimed jumped routes, and then you're giving up 300 yards in a game and you're getting no picks, and then you're sitting on the bench, much like we saw Emmanuel Forbes get benched earlier this year for the Washington football team. But Stephon Gilmore really stepping up and taking over that number one corner role to ease that pressure on the rookie DaRon Bland has been such a huge benefit to this team. He said at the beginning of their game this week, A.J. Brown called him old and washed up, and that lit a fire under him, and it certainly did. He locked up A.J. Brown the entirety of the game. The Eagles offense couldn't get anything going on his half of the field. He's been such a great find for them, and for just a fifth-round pick, you have to wonder what some of these teams are thinking in the offseason, moving these proven commodities for mid-round draft picks. Just unbelievable to look back at in the midseason, in the late season, and see how they're playing compared to the draft capital that they got in return for some of these veteran stars. And it seems like this happens every single year. So I don't know who it'll be next year, but I'm sure in the offseason we'll have a questionable veteran swap for a mid-round pick, and we'll be killing them right about now.
Right. And not to mention, too, that DaRon Bland started the year at slot. So there could be a scenario in the upcoming future when Diggs comes back. Diggs, Bland, Gilmore. That's an elite secondary.
It's a scary group, Casey.
Yep. They will have the opportunity to go up against Josh Allen, who, whether we think he is an elite talent, which he is, whether we think that he's turnover prone, which he is, they're gonna have his chance. They're gonna have chances to try to stop him, try to pick him off, and Josh Allen is also going to torch them one way or another. That's just how this works. If you play against Josh Allen, he's gonna have his way with you on 10 or so plays, and you're gonna have your way with him 5 of those times or 5 times. It just, Josh Allen is so up and down. You never know what Josh Allen you're going to get. If he comes out and he's Superman, it's going to be a long day because that team really loves to give up yards. They're a bit of the bend, don't break mold. But if Josh Allen comes out there a little off his game, I think Cowboys just absolutely torch the Bills. Now, it's not all Josh Allen. James Cook has been doing okay. He's been doing well when he has his chances. He's got over 1,000 scrimmage yards this year, 6 yards a touch. He needs the ball more often, I think. That would really benefit this team. But other than that, this Bills offense needs another guy to step up.
Yeah, the receivers overall have hung Josh Allen out to dry. We talk about how it's usually Stephon Diggs and then everyone else, and you're just begging on that second guy to step up. Well, recently, Stephon Diggs has gone missing too. We're not getting that normal production, that normal 10 for 110 that we get out of Stephon Diggs, and I know that that is an absurd requirement, an absurd expectation to put on a receiver, but that's what the Bills have set up here. They've set up an offense that requires Stephon Diggs to do that on a week in and week out basis. It's not a good system. And that wide receiver 2 is Gabe Davis, and it has been for a couple of years. And in his last 4 games that he's played, obviously the bye week in the middle there, but he's had 20 fantasy points, 0.0, 19 fantasy points, and another 0.0. That, I guess it is consistent. You can't call it inconsistency, but that consistent inconsistency is part of the reason that the Bills' offense is just so anemic this season. They can't get anything going consistently. James Cook seems to have taken that wide receiver 2 role to some degree. Dalton Kincaid been a great boost to that offense, but it all comes down to Josh Allen. The weight of that city, the weight of that team is on his shoulders. And more often than not, Josh Allen keeps them in football games and he gives them a chance to win it. But a lot of the times the ball's in his hand at the end and he does turn it over as well. So I don't know. Josh Allen is kind of just, hope and pray if you're a Buffalo Bills fan that you get a good day, because those good days are better than almost anyone else in the entire league. But the bad days get pretty ugly. So against the defense like this, a very opportunist defense in the Cowboys that'll certainly capitalize on any of those little tiny mistakes that he might make. I'm worried about this Bills offense really getting off the rails early, but if he's on, he'll be able to capitalize on the holes that this Cowboys defense allows.
That's right. And the one thing that when you think of the Buffalo Bills having, you think Josh Allen and you think a pretty good defense. Now, they had a lot of injuries early on in the season. They have definitely corrected themselves since then. They have definitely gotten back to playing much better. The one thing that this Buffalo's defense has is depth. They've got good depth pretty much everywhere. And the trade for Rasul Douglas has really panned out really well for them. They have a great defensive line. They have a great defensive line rotation. I see that you have written right now that they're the 14th, right in the middle of the pack. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how they are. I think, without those injuries, that they would be a top 10 defense probably. With the injuries to their star players, they're still right there, or right there with any team in the NFL right now. They can get after the quarterback. They can make plays when they need to. They're pretty good overall.
Yeah, it's easy to point to Von Miller as the superstar of the defense, but he's not at a superstar level anymore. And that's okay to say because he's a productive player and he's doing what he needs to do for that team. You have guys like AJ Epinesa on the other side, and then whoever the linebackers are that they're plugging and playing for Matt Milano at this point in the season have been playing great. That defense is starless at this point. It's just a bunch of guys who know their job, know what they're doing, and doing it together. And they're doing a really good job about getting better every single week. It seems like this Bills defense is really going to peak at the right time. I know you're saying that about a lot of teams right now in the NFL, but this is the right time to peak if you're going to start playing well. And that Bills team is in a very similar situation to the Cincinnati Bengals, sitting there, the same record right there in the clump of the AFC wildcard race. They have a little bit better odds to make it than we do if you look at the long season futures. But I'm really excited about what this Bills team is going to do down the stretch here. We have, 3 weeks left of NFL football, and I really think this Bills team is going to sneak into the playoffs. I know it's going to take a lot of help and basically winning out, but this Bills team's special and they have a lot of talent. And if they just figure it out a little bit, I really expect them to turn it on and become the Bills team that we expected earlier in the year here down the stretch.
I know we didn't plan on talking about them at all, so I don't know if you're ready for this conversation, but have you looked at Miami's schedule? There's a really good chance that Miami loses out and the Bills just sneak in and win the AFC East, which is absolutely hilarious in my opinion. Yeah, there's a very high chance of that happening, and if that does happen, yeah, I mean, what do we think of Miami at that point? But also,
I know Zach Wilson looked pretty good last week, but I'd be a little hesitant giving him the win in Miami this week already. That's a little hurdle for the Dolphins lose out strategy. But after that, Cowboys, Ravens, Bills could definitely lose all three of those. Maybe Zach Wilson gets another 300-yard game under his belt and pulls it off.
Well, even if the Miami wins against the Jets and they lose those other three, I think that puts them at what? I gotta look at this again. That puts Miami at 10-7, which Buffalo could afford to lose a game and still beat them because they would have the tiebreaker over them if they beat Miami twice. So, yeah, I think what I'm basically getting at is saying I think there is a really good chance that Buffalo does get in. If you believe in the Buffalo team at all, I think you should put some money down on them making it because there's a really good chance that Miami loses all three of those games. I mean, just look at how they played against the Titans, and with that injury to Tyreek Hill, we have no idea what that's going to look like. Anyways, Buffalo's favored by 2.5.
-2.5 in Buffalo. 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to rock with the Bills. The spread doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The Cowboys, coming off a win against the Eagles, looked really, really good. Would assume they were favored in this game, but the Bills look good too. The Bills played some pretty good football. Say whatever you want about how that game ended against the Kansas City Chiefs, but they won the football game against a pretty good Chiefs team. So I think the Bills know that they pretty much have to win this game to stay where they want to stay in terms of looking ahead and trying to get to where they want to get to at the end of the season. So I'm going to take the Bills because I think they're going to play it like a playoff game, and I don't like the Cowboys in the playoffs.
So I'm picking the Bills as well, but not exactly for the same reasons. I just think that Buffalo at that stadium on a grass field, Dallas does not play well on grass fields. I don't know if you know this. They play much better when it's turf, when they're able to make really hard cuts, and it's going to be cold. Could potentially be bad weather. So I think that might play into their favor a little bit. And I think if you're going to talk about which offense has more potential to explode, I'm going to give the edge to Buffalo in that regard because of Josh Allen. Now, Dallas has played really great on offense. I don't deny that. It's just I'm still going to doubt a little bit. I'm allowed to doubt a little bit, especially when it comes to two possible playoff contending teams. If Cowboys beat the Bills, then yeah, I think Cowboys have a really good chance of making some noise in the playoffs. But until then, I'll go with Josh Allen. I'll go with the better quarterback and see if they can get a win. Moving on. Ravens versus Jags. Baltimore favored by 3. Honestly thought this would be a little higher. The Ravens have been favored in pretty much every game that they've played in, maybe except for the Cincinnati game early on in the season. But Jaguars have not really looked great the last couple weeks. The injury to Trevor Lawrence maybe didn't do them any favors last week. Maybe that's why they're not nearly as bad underdogs as they are this week in that regard. But I thought the Ravens would be much higher, in all honesty. I think they're just rolling right now.
Yeah, I would agree. The offense looks really, really good. Obviously, 37 points to win in overtime against the Rams last weekend. But there are some questions I have about that defense. The Rams' offense is not the best unit in the league. I know Matthew Stafford is obviously a Super Bowl winning quarterback that puts up numbers all the time. Puka Nacua is having his amazing rookie season, and Cooper Kupp's Cooper Kupp. But that offense this season has not been incredible. And 31 points against this Ravens defense in Baltimore is something that I was not expecting and something that definitely scared me a little bit. But on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens, it all comes down to number 8. And number 8 has been incredible this year. Lamar Jackson, every single thing they ask him to do, doing with flying colors, whether that's throwing for 300 yards, which he has done plenty this season, or running the ball 10, 15 times a game, which he does seemingly every week at this point in the Todd Monken offense. He's been great, and he's been exactly the breath of fresh air that the Ravens wanted to see after last season with the injury and the contract debacle. This is what they wanted to see out of Lamar Jackson, and he's delivering.
Yeah, I think, if Lamar would score more, he probably would be the MVP frontrunner, to be honest with you. I think he's got the yards. I think he's got the record. I think he's the most consistent. And he's doing it with less talent, in my opinion. Excuse me. But, oh, man, excuse me. Sorry. Lamar is good, and he's consistent, and he performs when they need him to perform. That's the key. When it's a game that they need Lamar to show out for in the regular season, he's lights out. So I think that is something to take in consideration when we go into picking these games, or this game in particular. But when we talk about his weapons, and I said that he doesn't have the greatest weapons, it was kind of a lie. He does have some good weapons. Keaton Mitchell is still explosive. We talked about him when he first got his first couple snaps in the NFL. He's still very explosive. You have there 8.9 yards per touch. I mean, that's insane. I mean, he's almost averaging a first down every time he touches the ball. Isaiah Likely, he's done a phenomenal job replacing Mark Andrews. Um, he had a really great game against the Rams. And then Zay Flowers and OBJ, the duo there has been good the last couple of weeks. It's been a while, but I think they've finally gotten a groove, especially in the pass game, to where you can really start to see this offense flourish.
Absolutely, and I think that comes down to Zay Flowers. And I know they spent the big money on Odell Beckham, and they've done a lot of surgery to that receiving core with Nelson Aguilar coming in this offseason and signing guys along those lines. But Zay Flowers has been the shot in the arm this offense needed. They've been looking for that electric playmaker on the outside seemingly since Lamar took over at quarterback. They just have not been able to find the answer at receiver. And Zay Flower gives them that horizontal speed, that quick burst energy that they need to really electrify that offense. And it's freeing up Odell Beckham to do what Odell Beckham does best. Since Zay Flowers is taking those underneath routes and turning them into 10, 12, 15 yards and touchdowns, Odell Beckham can go run in a straight line down the sideline and catch 2 streaks a game. Because at this point in Odell's career, that's what he is best at. And Todd Monken seems to know that. Lamar seems to know that. And they're really using these weapons to the best of their ability. And I want to applaud the Ravens as much as it pains me, because for so long it seems like the Ravens have been stuck with poor weapons or below average weapons in the league. And they just kind of mailed it in and said, we can't do it this year. We're just going to run Lamar 20 times. And, we'll sign Mark Ingram and we'll just become, the bad boys in the AFC North and smash mouth football. Well, they still don't have the best weapons on the outside. They have a rookie and a really old receiver and a whole lot of meh behind those 2 guys. But they're buying into this system and they're committing to the new offense. They're committing to throwing the ball. They're committing to getting those guys on the outside involved on a weekly basis. And it's really great. And it's set their offense up for a lot of success. And Keaton Mitchell coming in and getting almost a first down, a carry, has been exactly what they needed after losing J.K. Dobbins earlier in the year. Letting Gus Edwards go back to that complimentary back role, Justice Hill fall back to where he's more comfortable in that third down little splash of anything. I really like the way the Ravens offense looks right now. I think they're really figuring it out and coming together as a unit.
My only gripe with this offense is the fact that Lamar currently has 123 touches, carries, 123 carries, and then we're not even mentioning that he's been sacked 31 times this year. So he's been hit 150 plus times this year. And we know that there's a chance for injury every time you run the ball. Every time that you get hit, there's a chance for injury. Now, he's got 644 yards, 5 yards a carry, which is really good. I don't deny that, but at what point are we going to say that the risk is too much? Like, they can already run the ball very effectively, even if Lamar is not running the ball. Like, one game this year, he only ran it 5 times for 17 yards, and they still won the ball game. Like, they don't have to run him 10 times every game. I was about to say other numbers, but it's actually pretty consistent that they give him the ball 10 times a game. But you get my point. I worry about that part to his game, part of this offense. I don't want it to catch up to him. Because without Lamar being healthy, it just doesn't seem like, well, first off, the whole entire AFC North starting quarterbacks would be non-existent in the playoffs, which would just be nuts. But 2, the NFL needs explosiveness. They need a guy like Lamar to really push and sell the NFL. The defense.
One last thing about this Ravens offense. This week, they went out and signed Malik Cunningham off the Patriots practice squad. Malik Cunningham, Louisville quarterback, backed up Lamar Jackson for a period of time, then obviously took over the reins. An electric run-first quarterback that has switched to wide receiver since he came into the league. Tries to do a little bit of both with the Patriots, and obviously that didn't work out. I think if there's a team that's going to use his skill set the way that all of us that watch college football know Malik Cunningham can be used, it's the Ravens. I would expect him to get, maybe not this week, but soon in the very near future, I would expect him to get touches in that offense in some sort of gimmicky way. When they had RG3 and Mark Ingram there, they ran that Heisman package to get playmakers the ball in space. Malik Cunningham's an exciting athlete, and the Ravens are a pretty innovative offensive unit. I would expect them to get him the ball sooner rather than later this season.
Good call. Good call. I didn't even know, didn't pick that up. That will be interesting to look out for. The defense for the Ravens. We've talked about this defense for the whole season, and we've said time and time again, they don't really have a guy that is statistically like their star. There's not like a guy that stands out. They have a lot of above average talent. Well, I guess you don't need superstar talent. And the Baltimore Ravens just kind of proved that. I mean, this whole entire season, I mean, like Roquan Smith is really, really good. Kyle Hamilton's really good. After that, like Justin Madubuike, I guess, maybe, but he's been bouncing around the league. Jadeveon Clowney, not elite talent. I mean, he's good, but he's not all-star. Kyle Van Noy bounced around a little bit. Like, what is so special about this defense is that they all play extremely disciplined. They all play exactly how the coach wants them to play. Disguising their coverages, confusing quarterbacks. The defense, statistically elite. But like you said before we started talking about them, they have games where they give up 31 points against the Rams. Like, what's that about? Like, that's not a team you should be giving up 31 points to.
Yeah, 31 points to the Rams, 33 points in a loss to the Browns. There's been glimpses this season where this defense has not been that shutdown, drag-out elite unit that we've seen most of the year. And when they're on, they're just as good as all those other top defenses in the league, the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Browns, all those statistical juggernauts. The Ravens are right there and leading in a lot of categories against most of those units. But they have those hiccups where they just have a lapse in coverage or, the pass rush doesn't get home, which sounds crazy when they have 15 guys with at least one sack, led by Madubuike in the middle with 11. But at some points in the season, this Ravens defense seems to have just fallen asleep. And I don't know what that might have been or what causes that, but it can't happen down the stretch, and it can't happen against truly elite teams. This unit avoided a massive loss this last week. Kyle Hamilton, non-contact injury. It looked really ugly. He walked off the field, and everyone kind of assumed that his season was probably over by the looks of it. Turns out it's just a sprained MCL. Harbaugh said he will be week to week from here on out. That is a huge win for this Ravens defense. And then right behind that 15 sacks on the defensive line are probably the best middle linebacking pair in the league this season, Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith. Roquan Smith leads all middle linebackers in Pro Bowl votes after the first returns today. He has been unbelievable since the Ravens gave him the record-breaking $20 million a year contract for an off-ball linebacker. He's somehow playing his way into that not being an overpay. He's been completely ridiculous for that defense. He's been a second coming of Ray Lewis, if you will, energizing the city the way his pregame speeches go, the energy he provides on the sideline, the leadership in the middle of that defense. He has been an unbelievable trade for that team and that defense. On the other side of the field, Casey, the Jaguars offense did not look good at all this last weekend. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence went down late in the game against the Bengals, and then he decided to play on just 4 days rest, which is an unbelievable decision from him for a high ankle sprain that usually has guys out 4 to 6 weeks in most cases. And he did not look good. Trevor threw 3 picks. One of them was not his fault, but the other 2 were pretty bad. And then at the end of the game, he was moving around pretty well, and he seemed to have his wits about him and his legs just fine. So I question whether Trevor Lawrence was fully healthy last week, and that makes me hesitant to grade that Jaguars offense off of that pretty abysmal game last week. But coming in against this Ravens defense, definitely not a unit you want to be banged up against. Trevor Lawrence is going to have to use his legs. He's going to have to avoid a pass rush. I'm really worried about this Jaguars offense if Trevor's not healthy.
Right. I think that is definitely the key to this game is whether or not Lawrence is healthy, whether or not he can avoid the pass rush. You look at some of the games this year, you look at Cleveland, in which we don't know if he was fully healthy or not. He was sacked 4 times, didn't look very good. You look at the 49ers, he was sacked 5 times. He did not look good at all in that game, not one bit. Now, Buffalo's a little different. He was sacked 5 times in that game, but still managed to throw for 315 yards. Won that game, I think, in the fourth quarter. You look at Kansas City. He was sacked 4 times in that game. Did not look good. So this Ravens defense does make me very nervous for our guy, Trevor Lawrence. I think it's not a great matchup. I think that offensive line versus that defensive line just outclasses them in so many different ways. They're going to have the rest of their skill players perform at a high level. And with the way that Travis Etienne has been playing, when Etienne doesn't play well either, I mean, when they can't run the ball, there's nothing to really lean up against. There's nothing to really help support this offense. It's very it kind of balances on 2 guys. Lawrence and his ability to play well and play efficiently, be able to avoid pressure, and then 2, being able to run the ball with Travis Etienne. In the last couple of weeks, he's not been able to run the ball, and they've resulted in losses. Anytime that you're able to stop the run, it seems like this Jaguars team just it cannot function the way that it wants to. Can't run the play actions like they want to. And on top of that, since they don't have a true number 1 like elite skill guy at receiver or tight end, they've got like 1 Bs or 2 As, if you ask me, at all those positions. 3 different guys, Ridley, Kirk, and Ingram. It just makes it to where it's a lot of pressure and weight on, like I said, Lawrence and Etienne. So the Ravens are really good at stopping the run. They're really good at getting after the quarterback. It's not a good matchup. Not a good matchup. If they're going to want to win, if the Jags are going to want to beat the Ravens, Evan Ingram has got to continue to play the way he's been playing. Pop off. You got to get that linebacker duo off of your back. You got to get them worried about the pass so then you can start running the ball a little bit more effectively. Evan Ingram last 2 weeks, I think he's got 3 touchdowns and over 200-something yards. That's going to be my key for them to be able to be successful on offense is Evan Ingram's success. And then the Jaguars defense, they are what I thought they were. That's
a pretty good way to put it.
They stopped getting the turnovers, and they started getting exposed on the secondary, started to get exposed in their pass rush. You can't just have Josh Allen. You got to have other guys to help complement that pass rush. And you see what it looks like when it doesn't happen. You get torched. You get shredded by backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, we talked about the Jaguars a lot the first couple weeks of the show, first 10 weeks of the NFL season, and we were saying, holy cow, this defense has no stars anywhere. It's just a bunch of guys playing together, playing good football, and they have these gaudy turnover numbers that is just keeping them in games and really making this bend, don't break philosophy come to fruition where they're allowing a whole lot of yards and then just no one is able to score on them. Well, those turnovers have evaporated, much like Casey said, and this unit just simply is not very good anymore. These guys are going back to playing a lot like the name on the back of their jersey suggests they should play. They're playing like the back of their baseball cards, if you will. And it's upsetting for this Jaguars defense. Joe Flacco and Jake Browning the last 2 weeks have hung 30 points and over 300 passing yards on your defense. And I know Joe Flacco's an elite quarterback, and most people watching this show right now absolutely love Jake Browning, but If those two quarterbacks at this point in time are going to be going for 300 yards and 30 points on your defense, and you expect to compete for a Super Bowl, that's not exactly a recipe for success. But it's important to recognize the greatness in the pile of poop every now and then, and that greatness is Josh Allen. Josh Allen has been unbelievable this year. His talent somehow does not go missed when you watch a Jaguars game, and the rest of the defense is just absolute garbage. Josh Allen produces every single play, and he got rewarded for that 2 weeks ago in one of the worst plays I've ever seen. The first touchdown of his career, Tyler Boyd right into his lap, and he scored. So congrats to Josh Allen for that one, but he's had just an absolutely amazing season for this Jaguars defense, and he's definitely a bright spot to build around if they can figure out how to lock him up long term.
Yeah, of course. Baltimore favored by 3. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking? Where are you leaning?
I'm going to take the Ravens. Everything about that number tells me that I should take the Jaguars, and Vegas doesn't think Trevor Lawrence is hurt, and maybe, the trailer park down there in Jacksonville is going to be bumping for Sunday Night Football, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think this Ravens team is really good, and the last 2 times, really the only 2 times that we've seen this Jaguars team play an upper tier contender, they lost 17-9 to the Kansas City Chiefs and couldn't do absolutely anything on offense. Then they lost 34-3 and just got beat up and down the field by the 49ers for 60 minutes. So this is another upper tier contender in the Baltimore Ravens, and I just expect them to do the exact same thing.
Now, I do think I recall last year the Ravens faced the Jags. It went down to that final kick where a very rare miss from the best kicker in the league. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I don't know why. That's really poor on me.
Tucker?
Tucker. But yeah, it was a 28-27 victory for Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence was 29-37, 321 yards and 3 touchdowns. Just double checking inside this game. Lamar Jackson played that game. He was 16-32 for 254 yards and a touchdown. Lamar had 14 carries for 89 yards. It looks like Travis Etienne didn't even play in this game. So I don't know if maybe they're just basing it off of what happened last year. If there's some sort of mismatch, it doesn't really look like it. I mean, Zay Jones was the leading receiver with 145 yards. It's kind of hard to believe. I don't know. I have no idea why it's currently at -3. Like you said, it's a little weird. I'm still picking the Ravens because I think the Ravens they match up really well on defense, but at the same time they still lost last year. So I don't know. We'll see. Interesting game for me though to keep an eye on for sure. And then we have
last but not least, the crown jewel, Casey.
Yeah, Thursday Night Football. Woo! Chargers versus the Raiders.
Easton Stick versus question mark. This morning, Antonio Pierce came out and said that he doesn't know who's going to start at quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. So that's fun. That makes this fun game even more fun. So a lot of the stuff I had to say here was revolving around Aiden O'Connell playing quarterback for the Raiders, and it seems like everything is kind of pointing towards him sitting, whether that's Brian Hoyer or Jimmy Garoppolo. I guess we will see tomorrow night. But this Chargers offense without Justin Herbert, now this might sound crazy, kind of excites me a little bit. And I know you might say that's crazy because they looked pretty garbage with him in at quarterback, but it comes down to a lot of the same things that I said about Zach Taylor when talking about the Bengals and play calling without Joe Burrow. I think Kellen Moore is play calling for his job here. Brandon Staley is obviously going to be fired at the end of the season. That's not going to come as a surprise to anybody. But Kellen Moore is a big enough name in the offensive coordinating position that I think the next coach would consider having him stay on as the offensive coordinator. If he can go out there with Easton Stick or Max Duggan at quarterback and put on a show and at least be a competitive offense and an interesting offense, I think that means something for Kellen Moore, and I think that's something that they're going to try to do. And with Justin Herbert out, they also have Keenan Allen out as well. That was announced just a couple hours ago. So Easton Stick is not going to have any help on the outside. My question is, maybe today is the day. Well, tomorrow would be the day, but maybe tomorrow is the day that Quentin Johnston breaks out, Casey. Maybe Quentin Johnston breaks out now. Because this last week with Easton Stick came in and Quentin Johnston had 3 catches for 91 yards. Maybe the key to unlocking Quentin Johnston was Easton Stick.
Oh, yeah, that was the key to the lock pick. I don't know, man. This Chargers team is just really bad. It's just so bad. I don't even understand why it's bad. Like, their offensive line last couple of years has been good, but this year it seems like they've really taken a step back. The injuries, the weapons have not been there. Quentin Johnston, man, I just can't believe we're getting to a point where we're talking about, can he actually do something this year? Max Dugan maybe can unlock him too. Like that could be a potential possibility. His old teammate. I don't know. Austin Eckler too. Like I don't know what to make of this Chargers team. We talked about on Box Lunch today, the teams that are currently in the worst position in the NFL. Like the Panthers are by far the number one team with the worst position because you don't have your number one pick and you have the number one pick. Yeah, that's bad. But I think right behind them, honestly, is the Chargers because money, cap is strapped. You've invested in defense and offense, and they both stink. You lose your quarterback. You've wasted time. I don't know. I just feel like it's more in our best interest to talk about the Raiders because I think they have a little more hope. But at the same time, they don't even have a starting quarterback announced. These two teams are just miserable. And this is, honestly, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here before we wrap up and give our picks for Thursday night. This is what Patrick Mahomes has to face 4 times a year. These two teams. These two abysmal teams every season. And not to mention what Denver had for the last couple years too. I mean, it's a joke. It's honestly a joke that some of these divisions, what their current status is. Like the AFC North is just by far the hardest division in football. Even with guys, your starting quarterbacks all being hurt, it is brutal division.
We're all above 500.
Yeah. And yet the Chargers, they should be a good team. That's the thing is like you look at that roster and it's like, what in the world happened here? I mean, they had Khalil Mack, who's had like 13 sacks on the year. They've got
15.
15. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's 15.
15 leads the NFL.
And then they have Joey Bosa. They have Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James or Derwin Jr. or whatever, and on offense they have.
It's been a first-round pick on. Now I'm blanking on his last name. His first name, Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma, first-round pick, middle linebacker. He hasn't panned out to be anything. They have the second most money spent on the defensive side of the ball of any team in the entire league behind the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that defense is not any good, and the offense is not any better. So I think you're definitely right with this season, the Chargers being a pretty gloomy team to watch the rest of the way. But I think that all changes in the offseason. I think Brandon Staley is out. I think the Chargers are probably the most appetizing head coaching job on the market because you're going to be competing with the likes of Chicago, who I guess hypothetically you could draft your own quarterback. But if they're pushing for Justin Fields like it sounds like, I don't know that anyone is going to want to go to Chicago. Then you have Carolina, who, like you said, doesn't have their own first-round pick and whose roster is so far away from being competitive. With the combination of Justin Herbert and then some of the young talent that you just named on the defensive side of the ball, I think one of the big-name head coaches this offseason, whether it's Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick, ends up with the Chargers.
Yeah, I have to agree. It would be very interesting to see, John. would be very, very interesting to see Belichick because, I mean, you're going up against Mahomes 2 times a year. That would be something. But yeah, the two teams. I'm gonna put up the game again. Chargers. I'm actually mad at the Chargers. Frustrated with the Chargers. The Raiders. I'm. There's something wrong there with the organization too. Like they keep missing on coaches. They've got some good talent. I think they've had a couple misses in draft picks, but they've got a good core of guys there. They need to figure out the quarterback position. Clearly, Garoppolo is not going to be the answer there long term. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this game? I've ranted quite a bit about these two teams.
I'm going to take the Raiders just because of the simple fact that I'm not betting on a guy named Easton Stick. And when two rosters this bad are playing, that's kind of the rationale you need to go into when you're picking a game like this. I mean, Josh Jacobs questionable with a quad injury. Javante Adams came down with the flu today and he didn't practice. So I really don't know what to expect on the football field from a sheer numbers standpoint when these two teams face off on Thursday night. There will not be a star anywhere unless you still count Austin Eckler, who topped out, I think, 16 miles per hour last week. So he's getting up there in age and he's getting real slow too. So, yeah, this is going to be a pretty big stinker. So if you give me a full field goal for one of my boys, quarterback in the Raiders, I'll take the Raiders.
Thomas just wrote in the chat 0-0 tie.
Thomas is gonna love my pick if he likes a 0-0 tie.
I'm gonna go with the Raiders just because you did as well. Brandon Staley needs fired like yesterday, 2 weeks ago. I'm done talking about the Chargers. They make me so mad. They make me frustrated. Make me angry. What do you have for us, Jacob? Picks for this
I have a
Thursday night
few.
game?
I have a few picks this weekend for this Thursday night game. It's exam week here at Alabama, so I've been spending most of my time this week, studying, taking my tests. But when I have a chance to dive into the sports books and find some props and have a reason to do so, I spend some time on it. So I have 4 plays that I just absolutely love on Thursday Night Football that I think you guys should all love too. The simple one, the easy one, under 34. Neither of these two offenses are putting the ball in the basket per se. So I think under 34 is about as easy as it gets. Keenan Allen out, and I had this written down before Keenan Allen was out, but I'm taking Quentin Johnson to score a touchdown. I think they're going to try to get him involved. The new offense, it was plus 600 before Keenan Allen went down. I don't know if that's still going to be the case, but the value should still be pretty high. I like Quentin Johnson to score a touchdown. I know I was, saying Austin Eckler this, Austin Eckler that, talking about the Chargers, and I'm certainly not a believer in him returning to Austin Eckler of old, but Austin Eckler over 12.5 carries tomorrow night with Easton Stick or Max Duggan at quarterback. I think that's a pretty low line. He was getting easily hitting that number with Justin Herbert at the helm, and you have to think that they would want to run the ball more often than not with the questionable quarterback play. The first drive of this game being a punt is minus 150. That is not team dependent. It's just the first drive of the game results in a punt, minus 150. I think that one is pretty good as well. And then my big kahuna is this game, yes, there will be overtime. Plus 1450, yes, there will be overtime. On Sunday, for the first time in my lifetime, we saw 2 NFL games go to halftime with a 0-0 tie. This was the first time since 1988 that this was the case. 2 NFL games with a 0-0 tie. NFL football at this point in the season, with this quarterback situation going on in the league, has gotten to a point where it's almost impossible to watch when these teams are on offense. And I don't think that's going to change tomorrow night. This is going to be a really low-scoring game, and 3-3 into overtime. Thomas loves the 0-0 tie, and I'm all for it because it would cash those overtime tickets. So plus 1450 for this game to go to overtime. I think we got a good one.
I was just looking at potentially parlaying two different players in their sacks, Khalil Mack and Max Crosby. But I don't think you can parlay those two. I don't think that books really allow you to parlay sacks like that. But I do like Khalil Mack to get a sack. I like Max Crosby to get a sack. I think those two are definitely ones to look out for.
Yeah, I like those as well. Both of these tackles, the tackle pairs are very questionable at best. So the star edge rushers, especially against young quarterbacks who simply cannot handle the pocket against guys like that, getting a sack for those two guys, good play.
Yep, yep. Jacob, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up the show?
Nothing from me. I guess with it being the 13th, so we'll see you guys next week on the 20th.
Yeah, yeah. I've been Mac.
I've been JT.
And we'll catch you guys next Wednesday.
See y'all.